10 years ago, Monka ass.
Today I want to talk about reading, why reading is important, and specifically how it relates to language learning, but more than that, how do we develop good reading habits? I love books. I'm surrounded by books. I've got books all over my house. I can't say I've read them all. I've read a lot of them. Sometimes I buy a book and I read it later on. I use books a lot for learning the languages that I'm learning. Reading is good for the brain. Research shows that it is very good for our cognitive functions. It creates new connections in the brain. It's not something that humans did for most of our existence, but it's very good for us. It's a big marker of professional success, of academic success, but not everyone likes to read, and some people don't have that reading habit. We hear a lot these days that young people aren't reading, that reading is declining, people don't read as well as they used to. So I want to delve into that a little bit. I Googled, are young people reading less today in a variety of languages? Swedish, German, Japanese, French, Italian, Turkish even. In fact, I Googled it in Turkish and found an article which I then imported into Link so I can read that and improve my Turkish while reading. What I discovered is that while there is a lot of sort of alarmist, hand-wringing about how reading skills are declining, in fact, the picture is a little more differentiated depending on how we look at it. First of all, there's always the assumption that at some period in the past, everyone was a great reader. That's not the case. In fact, probably more people read today than a long time ago. But even compared to the 50s, 60s, 70s, people read in different ways. Reading is not declining. You'll see some of these studies from Sweden and Italy and elsewhere show that young people are reading more, but they read a greater variety of things. Our world, our information world, has become more varied. One of the interesting observations was that young people don't like the kind of books that are suggested to them by teachers or others. Also, it seems that in most countries, young people read more, and then they start to lose that reading habit because there are more distractions. However, in my view, if you have been an avid
I do read from time to time.
young person, you now have that ability. You
Read your stupid ass questions, that is.
Those reading habits,
Shut the
which we
hell
will
up.
get into later on. One of the interesting things I came upon was a website called Wattpad, which creates sort of
I
a
do read
learning
them.
community online where people can recommend books to each other, people can write for each other. So I joined. I thought I would try it out. I'm not sure I'll spend much time there. I put non-fiction as my area of interest, and up popped a bunch of books that I have absolutely no interest in. Now, granted, this is a younger demographic. Apparently young people are more interested
I
in
read
fantasy or I don't know,
Nudge,
science fiction,
last book I
whatever.
read.
Not my interest. I have to kind of find a Wattpad
Picked it up
that
on the
corresponds
airport.
to my age group and my kind of interest. But the key there is, if you can provide young readers, middle-aged readers with things of interest to them, they're going to read. One of the big issues in reading has been the so-called reading wars. Like, what is the best way to teach reading? This is a war that has been raging since the 50s, if not longer. And it is this sort of disagreement as to whether kids should be taught phonics, in other words, to sound out the word based on the value of the letters, or
Okay, we get it. You like to read.